quick straw poll as we get going this morning. How many of you in here this morning like finding out that you're wrong? One, that's 100% more than I thought it would be. Yeah. On rare occasions do we like finding out that we're wrong. Usually that means we can find out we can learn something. But most of the time, we find out that we're wrong. It has this bad effect on us. And that's because being wrong is the worst. It's a terrible feeling to find out that you're wrong, to find out that you've clung to some belief or some opinion that you now find out was errant. And so, what normally happens when we find out that we're wrong is that for the most part, we cling to that opinion, or we try to figure out a way in which we were really right the whole time. We just had one part that might have been wrong. We'll try to cling to it. With all that we have, we'll try to fight for it. We will cling tooth and nail to those opinions, even in the face of overwhelming evidence. It is, as it turns out, incredibly difficult to change one's mind or to change somebody else's mind. And this is true for a few reasons. Our attitudes, psychologists say, our attitudes and opinions begin being formed when we're very young. They are formed by our genetic disposition and also by the world around us, nature and nurture, we might call them as well. So in essence, our attitudes and our opinions become part of who we are. They become part of how we define ourselves. So when we're presented with facts that run contrary to our beliefs, we can often feel personally attacked. This changes something about me that I thought I knew. And this can trigger what psychologists call the backfire effect. The backfire effect is when we are presented with facts that contradict our beliefs, but instead of saying, okay, this is new information, and reevaluating our position, we dig in deeper in our original belief, even in the face of these overwhelming facts. We can call this belief, we call it belief perseverance. So my belief will persevere even in the face of facts that prove me otherwise. The next thing that can happen after the backfire effect or belief perseverance is called confirmation bias, and you might have heard this one too. Confirmation bias is where, again, I'm presented with information that says that I'm probably wrong, and instead of saying, okay, let's reevaluate, I say, I prefer a second opinion. And so we will find a second opinion, third opinion, fourth opinion, fifth opinion, so on until we find someone who agrees with us. And then we say, see, I can't have been totally wrong because there are other people that feel the same way that I do. We will just keep getting second opinions until we find the one that we want. If you've been online at all in the last 7 to 8 years, you've seen this happening in every place and in every comment section available, especially when it comes to one certain area of our lives. One particularly divisive topic that has divided us into two competing camps for years and years, a topic that has divided families and caused awkward moments at the dinner table. Of course, I'm talking about which way do we hang our toilet paper? Do you hang over or do you hang under? I got you there. That's not where you thought I was going. Which way do you hang your toilet paper, over or under? So how many people are over the top toilet paper hangers, okay? How many of you are underneath toilet paper hangers? We have a few. How many of you, like me, and before this moment, never thought a thing about it and just stuck it on there however it went? Okay, psychopaths like me, welcome. Okay. Apparently, there is a method to the madness. Apparently, there is a way that you are supposed to hang toilet paper. And what if we can, in fact, prove, and people have been trying to prove, that there is a right way to do it? Well, in fact, we have the images from the patent filed by the toilet paper roll inventor, Seth Wheeler, who filed his patent in 1891. It feels like we should have had toilet paper before 1891, but that's a different story. 1891, Seth Wheeler filed this patent image right here. We have the drawings along with his explanations in which he talks about how this idea of hanging it over the top makes it easier to grab the loose end and also reduces the risk of gathering germs by brushing your knuckles up against the wall. It gives you a little extra space right there.
And so with all of this compelling evidence, with the original drawings of the inventor himself in our hands, has it swayed us? No, not at all. In fact, they did a recent study that showed when confronted with this evidence, would people change their opinions? And studies show that to this day, with all of this information available, still around 30 to 40% of people are passionately committed to using the toilet paper the other direction. Why? Because it's really hard to change our minds. It's really hard to change our ways. It's hard to change what we do. In light of all of this information, we can turn to Luke 19 if you have your Bibles. We're going to read from Luke 19 today and read a story that some of us have probably heard since we were children, probably heard since we were in preschool, and we've heard it so many times. We've sung little children's songs about it. We might not even notice what an incredible, miraculous thing happens in Luke chapter 19. So let's read Luke 19 together, beginning in verse 1. Jesus entered Jericho and was passing through. A man was there by the name of Zacchaeus. He was a chief tax collector, and he was wealthy. He wanted to see who Jesus was, but because he was short, he could not see over the crowd. So he ran ahead and climbed a sycamore fig tree to see him, since Jesus was coming that way. When Jesus reached the spot, he looked up and said to him, "Zacchaeus, come down immediately. I must stay at your house today." So he came down at once and welcomed him gladly. All the people saw this, and they began to mutter, "He has gone to be the guest of a sinner." But Zacchaeus stood up and said to the Lord, "Look, Lord, here and now I give half of my possessions to the poor, and if I have cheated anybody out of anything, I will pay back 4 times the amount." Jesus said to him, "Today salvation has come to this house, because this man too is a son of Abraham. For the Son of Man came to seek and save the lost." So in this brief little story, we have 10 verses about Zacchaeus. And in this brief little story, we learn a couple of things. First of all, we learn that Zacchaeus, as we sing in our kids' song, was a wee little man. And a wee little man was he, right? So wee was he that he couldn't see over everybody else. And so he does this thing where he climbs up in a tree to try to see, quote, who Jesus is. We also learned that he was a tax collector. So we've talked about this before, but not just a tax collector. We learned that Zacchaeus was a chief tax collector. He was the chief tax collector, which means he's kind of the head of the tax collectors. He sets rates. He sends people out to go have the taxes collected. He makes the list. He checks it twice. He sees what you're giving, and he sees what's going on here. And again, he decides how much should be taxed and how much shouldn't. We also learn that Zacchaeus is wealthy. And he's wealthy for a couple of reasons. First of all, this position that he holds is a prestigious place. He has a place of power. He has a position of power in the government. And so he would have been wealthy regardless. But also, tax collectors and chief tax collectors tended to operate on some slightly unethical practices. So because Zacchaeus could set rates, he could decide how much tax really needed to be paid. And so if he got word from on high that it was to be X amount, he could decide that for his area it could be just a little bit more, and then he got to pocket whatever was left. So his job made him wealthy, and then some unethical practices made him even more wealthy. So he's got a pretty good spot. He's got a really good job. He's making a lot of money. He's pretty powerful. Who among us would volunteer to mess that up? He's good. He's good to go. And he decides today that he wants to see who Jesus is. But again, being a wee little guy, that's difficult. So he climbs up in a tree. And who Jesus is, he finds out, is a man who would walk up to him, knowing who he is and knowing what he does, and invite himself to his house. Jesus walks up to Zacchaeus and says, "Hey, let's go hang out. I'm going to go be at your house today. Let's go eat." To be asked to host a well-respected teacher would have been a big honor. This is why everybody else is mad. This is a big honor to house Jesus, and Jesus picks Zacchaeus. And all these people are saying, he cheats us every day. This man is actively a sinner. He's defrauding us and stealing our money, and Jesus is going to meet at his house. What is the deal here? But as Zacchaeus begins to spend time with Jesus, something begins to happen inside of Zacchaeus. Something inside of him that I'm willing to bet he never saw coming when he decided that he wanted to see who Jesus was. Jesus begins to work on Zacchaeus' heart. Who Jesus is starts to have an impact on who Zacchaeus is. And then a real life miracle happens. A wealthy, powerful, and influential person changes his mind, changes his ways. Zacchaeus is transformed into someone who is honorable and willing to face public humiliation. He says, you know what, I'm here and now. I'm going to give half of what I have to the poor, and I will make it right. If I have cheated anyone, Zacchaeus is going to go to their house, and he's going to pay them back 4 times what he took. Jesus has transformed who Zacchaeus is. Jesus has changed Zacchaeus. Or consider what happens in Acts chapter 9. In Acts chapter 9, we learn about the conversion story of the man who wrote the majority of our New Testament, Paul. But before he was Paul, he was Saul. And in Acts chapter 9, we learn a little bit about Saul's background. Saul has been educated by the elite of Jewish society. He even name drops Gamaliel in one of his conversion stories. Gamaliel is an incredibly well-known teacher. Saul has risen through the ranks to become known as a bright up-and-comer. He is passionately committed to this cause. And what is the cause that he's committed to? Proving that Jesus is not the Messiah. He is here to weed out this group of people that claim that Jesus is the Son of God. He says, no, thank you. So he starts to persecute the followers of Jesus. He starts to track them down and put them in jail. And in fact, at the beginning of Acts 9, not only is he tracking them down and putting them in jail, we read that he was, quote, breathing out murderous threats against Jesus' disciples. Unlike Zacchaeus, who was unfamiliar with Jesus but wants to see who he is, Saul thinks he knows who Jesus is, and he's actively committed to rooting him out. He's actively committed to stopping him. And then one day he's on the road to Damascus, and Jesus stops him in his tracks and blinds him. Jesus says, you think you see, but you don't. You don't know who I am. You're wrong about me. The opinions and the thoughts and the education that you have are incorrect. I am not who you think I am. You see, but you don't see. He gives Saul some instructions and sends him away to the home of a man named Ananias. I don't think in this story we've given enough credit to Ananias. God comes to Ananias and says, hey, listen, I need you to go find this guy named Saul. And Ananias says, now hold on a second. I know that name. He's killing people like me, or threatening to kill people like me. He's putting people like me in prison. And Jesus says, yeah, not anymore though. He's my chosen instrument to reach the Gentiles. I need you to go help him, and I need you to bring him to your house. And Ananias says, okay. And Ananias goes to find him. He brings Saul into his house. He lays hands on Saul. He prays for him, and something happens to Saul. Something happens inside of Saul's heart. Who Jesus is begins to shape who Saul is, and then another real-life miracle happens. A powerful, wealthy, and well-educated person changes his mind and changes his ways. And we read this in Acts chapter 9, verse 19. Saul spent several days with the disciples in Damascus. At once, he began to preach in the synagogues that Jesus is the Son of God. All those who heard him were astonished, and they asked, isn't he the man who raised havoc in Jerusalem among all those who call on this name? And hasn't he come here to take them as prisoners to the chief priests? Yet Saul grew more and more powerful, and he baffled the Jews living in Damascus by proving that Jesus is the Messiah. The presence of Jesus changed Saul. The presence of Jesus transformed Saul into somebody different. This is what the love of Jesus does. This is what the love of Jesus does that nothing else and no one else can do. Jesus changes hearts, Jesus changes minds, and Jesus changes lives. He did it for Zacchaeus in Luke 19. He did it for Saul in Acts 9. And for countless other examples, I just picked 2. There are so many as you read through our New Testament. This is what Jesus did, and this is what Jesus still does. A few years ago on one of our trips to visit the Casa, while we were there, we could tell that something was happening. The front office area, it was about dinner time when the office area is usually closed up and dark for the day. and the lights were on, and there was a lot of people bustling around at the front of the casa that day. And so we thought something is happening up there. It turns out that while we were there that day, the authorities had found a girl, I think she was around 12 or 13 if my memory serves right, sleeping behind a dumpster in town. So they picked her up and they brought her to the casa, and Gil accepted responsibility for her. He walked her into this place. We were eating dinner at the time, and he walked her into the mess hall, and there are all these kids and a bunch of white people sitting at these tables, and she walks into this room with Gil, and she's dirty from head to toe. Her face is dirty, her hands are dirty. She has these little sandals on that are broken, her feet are dirty. She has this yellowish kind of dress on, and it's smudged and dirty. And Gil brings her up, and if she already wasn't just mortified, she was now that she's standing in front of all of us. And Gil introduces her and says that she's going to be joining us. I'll never forget the look on her face. She was mortified and scared, and just this look on her face that felt like if I could just vanish to nothing and disappear right now, that would be the best thing. And a couple of the ladies who work at the casa came and got her, and they took her back while we were getting our dinner. They cleaned her up, and they changed her clothes. And a few minutes later, she came back out wearing some warm, comfy clothes and some new shoes. Her face and hands had been cleaned, and she was ready for dinner. And they walked her over and sat her at a little table with some girls that were her age. One of the other girls saw her sit down and got up and went and made her a plate and a cup of Kool-Aid and brought it to her and set it down in front. And they ate that night, mostly in silence, as this new girl had joined them at the table. Well, we went to bed after that. They went to bed. We went to our place. We went to work the next morning. We did our project, so we didn't really see the kids till after lunch. And after lunch, we got out to the playground, and we were playing with them, and I was looking for the new girl, and I couldn't find her. And I couldn't find her because I had looked right past her 3 or 4 times. I didn't even recognize her. By lunch the next day, she was running around on the soccer field at full speed, laughing and giggling and playing with the other girls. And then later that night, we had our devotional, and we sang our silly VBS songs. And I watched as she buddied up with a bunch of those girls from her table. They opened the songbook for her. They were helping her follow along. And she laughed and giggled as they tried to follow along with the hand motions. And we sang Tango Paz, Como en Rio as fast as we could. She messed up, and they messed up, and they just laughed. And they bumped each other and elbowed as somebody else messed up again on the next verse. And I thought to myself, this is less than 24 hours from when she walked into this room just petrified. What on earth could do this in one day to where she is running around on the playground and laughing and joking and singing worship songs with us? And the answer is the same that was true for Zacchaeus, and the answer is the same that was true for Saul. It's the love of Jesus. Only the love of Jesus can make that transformation in less than 24 hours. And this is the mission of the Casa, to be a vehicle for which the love of Jesus can make transformation like that. And that's the mission of the Casa because it's the mission of the church. Would we be committed to that type of mission? Would we be committed to being a place of welcome and warmth? Would we be committed to introducing people to the transformational love of Jesus Christ? A love that changes minds, a love that changes hearts, and a love that changes lives. If we can introduce you to that Jesus this morning, we'll have our invitation song now. We'll stand together, and Josh will lead us in one more song, and I'd be happy to pray for you if you'll come find me at the front. Josh.